Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime Talk.
Ireland's classic hits radio.
Welcome back to Nighttime Talk with Gary Brennan in for Niall Boylan. Now, my guest tonight is Katie Waissel, an English singer-songwriter who came into the public eye when she was in the 7th series of The X Factor in 2010. I watched it myself, and many of you would have done so as well. Since Liam Payne's tragic passing, he of One Direction, his X Factor co-star, has slammed industry professionals for not doing enough to protect stars. And she's here with me tonight to talk about her experience in X Factor and also this very important campaign. Hi Katie, thank you so much for joining me tonight here on Nighttime Talk.
Oh, thank you. Obviously the circumstances aren't exactly the greatest, but I do appreciate very much being able to speak with you and to the listeners here this evening. How are you?
I'm very well, Katie, and I am genuinely looking forward to talking to you because I've been following your story. Obviously, I saw you on The X Factor in 2010, and I remember you were absolutely brilliant on it. But I've been following your story in the last number of months especially, and I've seen many interviews that you've been involved in, and I've also watched many interviews, and I don't feel you've gotten a fair shake off people. You've been interrupted, you've been stopped, and you've been, I suppose, not allowed to speak. So I'm excited to give you the platform tonight, and I'm going to let you talk about your campaign. I'm going to let you talk about everything in depth. So I just wanted to assure you of that before we go anywhere. But before we get there, for the benefit of people who are listening in tonight who aren't properly familiar with the X Factor, I mean, there are people still out there that didn't watch it. Just bring us back.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I think we know where this conversation is going to go. But bring us back to 2010 and the experience you went through going into a show like that. Absolutely enormous.
Oh my great goodness. To start off with, actually, it was a show that I never wished to have been on. It wasn't actually a choice that I had chosen, which is something that I've been speaking about publicly as of recently, but not really been heard when I say that. Prior to the show, I really did have a promising music career as a singer and a songwriter. And so to find myself on a show that I had not really wished to have been on was quite peculiar in itself. It was just unfortunate that, some powers that be had decided that they wanted me on it, and there I was. And it unfortunately left me stuck between a bit of a rock and a hard place. I had a record deal out in America, and I'd finished a big show with the Coca-Cola company. So unfortunately, when the powers that be decided to spend some money, I guess, and having me up there, and I would never say anything that I wouldn't be more than willing and prepared to disclose evidence of in any which way, shape or form, that I was there. And it made life on that show even more difficult, knowing that I had my record deal that was purchased for a significant sum, and my songwrite and back catalogue then owned by said company. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because a lot happens behind the scenes, even before the live shows, that the general public are not actually aware of. The show is presented as a singing competition, but really it's not. It's an entertainment television show, which is fine. I just wish that there was more transparency. So the time on the show itself was pretty tough, to say the least. There was lots of, to start off with the basics, I guess. The schedule, to start off with the basics, we're not considered as employees. We were given lawyers to negotiate unfairly, really, our contracts. So we would be woken up at 7 o'clock in the morning, all systems go, film, this, that, and the other. Because it wasn't just the X Factor that we were filming for. We were filming the Extra Factor and bits on the side. There was a lot of waiting around. And then we would be done sometimes, especially on a Saturday night, by 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. And myself and fellow contestants, we had this little joke with us that we had already salted Walker's crisps waiting for us, but it was really, really grueling, and that's not even opening this can of worms that I don't know how much I can go into on your show, but I'm happy to wear my heart on my sleeve. That's without even going into the rigmaroles of the really not so nice things.
Well,
but,
we can get to that, Katie, because I want to hear about life post X Factor and your feelings about that. But just while we're still in 2010, are the contestants paid?
No, absolutely not. So when you're on the show itself, you're not paid. It's only, in 2010, it was the top 8 that made the tour that would be paid, but it was on a tiered system. So, wherever you placed, if you placed higher, then you would generate or get paid a little bit more. But the contracts that were in place were just absolutely shocking. Because really, technically, when we're talking about music, you have to think about performance. Well, you don't have to think about it, but those in the industry really should be paid performance royalties, merchandise sales, and so on and so forth. But a lot of that money was not included in what we were paid at all. Interestingly enough, we were all given the same accountant. We were all given the same people to deal with our legal situations and, contracts, and the same accountant and the same private doctor, lots of the same things. So no, we weren't paid to do the actual television show.
And you were advised to go on this. I get the impression from what you said earlier on, you had a career before you went into X Factor.
Oh,
and
yes.
You had, as you said, the record deal and everything set up. And you were advised to do the X Factor, I would imagine, off the top of my head, to say that it would raise your profile or whatever that is. You didn't go on to win the show, but did all the deals you had beforehand still stand?
No. Unfortunately not. Because the deals that I had entered prior were not expecting me to go and do that show. And nor was I, to be very transparent. So no, unfortunately not. I look back on my life prior to the X Factor from a music standpoint very fondly. I was honoured to, I say honoured, I was really honestly grateful to have. I did the music scene, I gigged, I did showcases, I had written with the best of them. I really worked hard. Back in those days, in the early 2000s, that's what one would do. And I was very fortunate to land a really an amazing opportunity with the Coca-Cola Company. And I did a show with them, a web series on YouTube called The Green-Eyed World. And it was the first time that YouTube cross-pollinated their videos with Facebook, and it was very exciting, and it was fantastic. And that was over in the United States as well. But once certain people's claws got sunken into me, I was stuck. I didn't have anything to go back to, and I was very unsure and unsettled about my future because music is all that I had known. That's all I'd done.
And when it wrapped up, Katie, did you immediately regret having done it, or did that come on later on?
Oh, I never, like I said, I never wanted to be there in the first place, and I tried to leave many times. Even my father went into the studios and said, "You need to get my daughter out of here." It was a very traumatic and difficult situation to be in. Being so young, it was quite some time ago, but also I felt such a heaviness and a heavy weight of that responsibility of not only could I not control or do anything that was happening to me at the time, I felt like, how can I protect my family and friends and loved ones? Because I just had to hold my breath and just get through it. And at the end of it, there was no like aftercare or anything, or even security, because during that time in 2010, I had serious death threats, but also my family's home got burgled, which was frightening. Everything was all up in the air. I couldn't wait to go back to the United States, which is where I was when certain people had told me to fill out this form. But even then, in 2014, I was dragged back to it. I don't know if you remember that, but in 2014, I appeared on the X Factor final in a group sing-off that was presented to me as something completely different.
I do remember it. How was it presented to you? Because you came back as almost a conqueror, like a past contestant, royalty almost. How was it presented to you?
It was presented as an opportunity via an email to say that they asked me to go back and perform one of my songs. And at the time I was songwriting with, this is now in 2014, with some of the best songwriters, again, ever. Justin Tranter from Semi-Precious Weapons. But he's written so many of the great songs that we all listen to today in the charts. And I got this email to say, well, we'd like you to come and perform one of your songs on the X Factor. And I immediately said no because of what had happened in 2010. And I was very concerned and hesitant to do so. And unfortunately, one of the usual ways that they get you is you get to see your family and this, that, and the other, because I was back out in LA. And next thing I know, a flight's been purchased for me. And then back in England and petrified. And when I went to the studios, I saw Brian Friedman, who is the choreographer, or was the choreographer. But I'd actually known Brian for many years prior to doing the show from LA. And I said to him, what is going on? Because I was then told it's a group performance. And then I was put in an outfit and then told I was going to be zip-lined in. And I panicked. So I called for a taxi to take me home. And I said, I can't, and I really don't want to do this. And a certain people came down and said, there are people that put so much into this and you don't want to let them down. And actually after the performance, I mouthed to Simon Cowell, you owe me one big time. And then that was in the press and media the next day.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I said, you owe me big time. And then the next day when I went back for the final, this is with, who was it? Ben Haenow that was on it. I was then, I kick myself now because I'm like, why didn't I question anything? Because I was upstairs in Simon Cowell's dressing room bar in Wembley Stadium, but I didn't see any other contestants. But hindsight's a beautiful thing, right? But I said to Simon, you've taken everything from me, the least you can do. Because he did. Psycho owned all of my songwrites and my back catalogue. And I said, the least you could do is just let me even write for your artists or anything. And so he called over somebody from his company and set up a meeting for us in LA. And that meeting in LA was just not what it was, and it was horrific, and something very terrible happened. And it's what's led me here to this very present day of why I'm fighting the good fight and set up my company and providing the tools and resources that I wish that I would have had then to make the industry a safer place.
Well, that's what I want to get to, Katie, and thank you for being so honest and sharing with your story there, because the year you were in X Factor was a pretty star-studded year indeed, and of course One Direction came up, and you forged a relationship with Liam Payne, of course, who tragically passed away recently. And I was wondering tonight, could you describe to our listeners what kind of a relationship you had with Liam, and how did it feel to get the news that he had tragically passed?
Oh, man.
Take your time.
Liam, thank you. Liam, I've got goosebumps. He had everything going for him. He was so grounding to so many people. We really trusted in one another because we had a shared experience of things that we knew weren't quite right. Liam later spoke about this actually on a podcast when he started to say, he would open up about when he auditioned for the show and when he was 14, and then he was brought back and he was made this promise by Simon Cowell. And it's very difficult in such a heightened situation anyway, and in a competitive situation, even though none of the contestants, because we all shared a house together, we were never competitive, but it was a, quote, competition. But Liam and I, we bonded over the fact that, for example, like I said, my record deal was purchased, but I didn't disclose that to anybody apart from Liam. And then Liam would disclose, when he auditioned for the show in 2014. So we really kind of had that bond and friendship there, and just turned to each other, and were each other's rocks throughout that. Because it's, how do I best explain this? When you all go through something, it's like almost, I wish I could compare it to a summer camp. When you're all on camp together and you're like, the year of 2010 of summer camp. But you have that bonding experience that unless you'd been there, nobody really truly knows. But yeah, he was such a grounding individual. He would walk into a room led with his smile and was just there for everybody. And he was so passionate about music and about singing, and that was his life. I remember when I heard the news, I was actually on a live space on Twitter, or it's now X, but I refused to believe it. But I was really worried about him because I'd not heard back from him in a while. And I'd reached out a few times and I said, hey, listen, I think it's incredibly brave and honorable for you to be speaking your truth and sharing your truth and your experience and so on and so forth. But I didn't hear back from him and I started to worry. So I sent, I believe his then agent, who I had known prior to the show, an email to check in, and I said, make sure that everything's okay, because I was worried. But I'm a mum to a 6-year-old, so I guess I put my mum's hat on, but I just knew in my bones, and knowing Liam he just...
Were
I
you
don't
aware,
know,
Katie, being so close to him, were you aware that he'd been experiencing some difficult times in his career?
Do you know what's interesting? And I'm going to be very open, honest, and vulnerable right here. It's not I wasn't aware. It's just the struggles that one deals with, the demons that one deals with post that show, is almost normal. So you don't see it for anything else. I think he's also incredibly strong, and so I have so many questions that are still yet left unanswered. And you know, my heart is with his family, obviously, who I'm sure have many more questions. So it's not to say it's normal for one to struggle, but it was normal in my mind's eye because so many of us did and do. You know, so he was trying to find his feet and trying to find his feet as a solo artist, and that's absolutely okay. The thing is with the X Factor and Psycho Entertainment and Simon Cowell is you're forever branded with it. It becomes your identity, and so the individual is no longer themselves anymore. It's not like, oh, you can go and get a regular job. You know, well, I mean, you could, but with your mental health standpoint of fear and anxiety and panic, it's very difficult, and you just become lost.
What do you believe, Katie, could have been done to help Liam?
So much. But I'm waiting for more answers as to what actually happened. To be able to even answer that more. In the very beginning, I know none of us had the right mental health support at all. But beyond that, if anything, quite the opposite, where those that were in positions to take care of us did everything but, all because they wanted the machine to keep going. So, for example, in 2010, like I said earlier, we had to see the show's private doctor. And I can only but speak on behalf of myself, but there were times where I was really breaking. I was at breaking point. I was beside myself. And my parents actually even came to the X Factor house because this alleged welfare person, who wasn't a welfare person, she's a casting director, but that's another story for another time. They came to the house and they said, we should get her to see the GP, as in like our NHS GP, and the show said no. And the next day I'm bundled under a blanket to see this private doctor that gave me 2 different types of medication, which I had to take in front of her. And then later on, I collapsed in Topshop. I think this was quite documented. No, the article came out in the Daily Mail. And when I collapsed, I didn't get any medical attention. I was literally handed shopping bags, told to go and smile for the cameras, get in the car, and there's a brown paper bag for a panic attack. So the welfare and duty of care of people on these shows at the very foundational part and point, it is not there. Had we have had the right support and guidance, but independently, perhaps we would then have the better tools to deal with things in the now. And I say that having been through PTSD therapy now for the last 3 years, I wish I had what I have now, but back then. And the show did have a responsibility, not just to Liam, but to so many others in the very beginning, because had they have provided even a fraction of what they should have done, we might be looking at a very different situation right now.
What would you say, Katie, to people that would say to you, why should the X Factor still have a duty of care almost 15 years later? Because that's a criticism that's been aimed at you before, isn't it?
It has. And I'll tell you why. Because it's not about having a duty of care in this present day. It's because they failed in their duty of care in 2010 that those, which is a solid 90% plus of contestants or former participants of that show are struggling. Some that you don't even know about. So when I bring up duty of care, it is because they failed and neglected it in the beginning. It's like the but-for. Okay, so in law, in tort law, or civil litigations, so not criminal, you would have to use the but-for test. Oh, I'm like, hey, I did my law degree during lockdown, which I was really surprised about. So I'm like, okay, how do I explain this? And I put myself on the spot. Okay, so but for, so had they had provided the right duty of care, meaning that they provided us with the right psychological support, mental health support, security, lawyers, independent, blah, 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 would we then be in this position now, all these years on? Just because there has been a tragic death, which is tragic, if we were to rewind time, why does it have to take a death to then to highlight again these systemic and historic issues that nothing is ever done about? You know, had the show, who had a duty of care to all of us, provided that right and relevant support, would we be where we are now? And don't forget, One Direction was still signed with Psycho and Simon Cowell after the show. So in their record deals, etc., so they're signed to contracts with unfair terms. I won't bore everybody with the legal stuff, but there is so much to be investigated, where one is, you know, potentially, allegedly held under duress to sign, where it specifically states in these contracts, if you do not sign this, I will find somebody else that will. It's awful. And majority of these contracts also confidentiality agreements. There is nothing there in the benefit for the individual that's signing in. So that's why I say they have a duty of care, and that's why it's so prevalent now when, you know, such tragedy unfolds. I mean, why they didn't look into duty of care when Amy Winehouse tragically passed away, who was signed to a record label, and she had security that would live with her in her house, God rest her soul. You know, we would say that Caroline Flack, people had a duty of care. She was in contracts with ITV. God rest her soul. You know, these people have a responsibility to look after the welfare of those that are working for them. Whether you're an employee or self-employed, they're still human beings. They're people.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for that. It was insightful and interesting, and you know, thank you for being so open and honest. I assume you're going to continue to campaign to address these systemic failures that you see.
Yes, absolutely. So I always say we must turn poison into medicine, and really fight the good fight. And in doing so, is again, I had knocked on many a door from government, members of parliament, police officers, law enforcement, lawyers, everybody that you can think of, and said, help us. And history only but proves that unfortunately and frustratingly, nothing gets done. Laws aren't changed. The College of Police Code of Ethics are not amended to reflect what needs be in today's day. So I said to myself, if they won't, then we will. And I founded OWL, OWHL. It stands for Overseeing the Welfare, Human Rights and Liberty for All in the Creative Industries. And we are set to revolutionize safety for everybody within it by providing a verified platform and network. So people, whether you're self-employed, freelance, you go through this verification process, and then you're activating your personal safety alarm on your lock screen phone when you check into your place of work, which is connected to your in case of emergency people. So God forbid there was a situation, you just tap that button and help will come. And I am campaigning to, in an ideal world, I would have launched this yesterday, but we're raising funds now to expedite it because the current Secretary of State of the DCMS, so that's Digital Culture, Media and Sport, who I wrote a letter to, the Secretary responded that she was very busy and couldn't meet with me to discuss protecting and safeguarding people in her industry. So I said, all right then, let's expedite OWL. And so I set up the GoFundMe. So any donation, no matter if it's a penny, 50p, whatever it is, we're trying to raise funds so we can launch the platform, the services, to protect everybody that's in this industry. And in a moment of need, they can tap that button and help will come.
Well, there you go, Katie. Thank you so much for joining me tonight and being so honest and open and insightful. I know you're in a good place in your life at the moment, and I hope you stay there. And best of luck with your campaign going forward.
Thank you. I saw that you're a fan of Metallica.
Yes, I am indeed.
Yes, as am I. I was looking at your profiles earlier, as am I. And so if anybody knows about the music industry or music per se, then, it's you. So I appreciate your support as well and for so graciously speaking with me.
No, it's been a pleasure,
Katie.
Katie.
Metallica.
Yeah, we're in the Metallica family. We're in the Metallica family, you and me.
Well, I'm honoured to be part of that. Well, thank you again, and God bless you all, and have a wonderful evening, and stay safe.
Thank you, Katie. Good night to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime Talk.
Ireland's classic hits radio.